I've made over 350 films in one way or another at this point. 380 actually, to be exact. When I find something that I want to make, I'm absolutely relentless about it, and I become tunnel vision on it. The money part of it will come to me if I make good movies, but the making money was never really the goal for me in making films. And that may sound stupid, but that's not my primary motivation. My primary motivation was to make great films. I'm trying to find the one yes, because that's all I need is one yes, because then it's going to happen. What I think you try to do is try to be ahead of the current trends, because in the end, that's going to benefit you the most. I'm thinking about every single factor of it. I'm thinking about who's going to buy this movie later on, who should be in this film, which actors would be perfect for it, which ones mean a little something so that we can actually go out and do some pre-sales. My name is Cassian Elwes, and I'm a movie producer. I dropped out of college, so that's not a good start here for UCLA, and which I don't suggest anybody do, but I was studying Arabic and Middle Eastern history, and I was very interested in making movies, so they didn't really seem to overlap with each other. And so I went to go work on a movie in Central America called The Dogs of War as a PA, basically. And I made enough money on that film, a little bit of money, $5,000. I saved everything that I was making in my per diems, and I decided to come to Los Angeles and figured that I'd stay here until the $5,000 ran out and see if I could get a job. And very fortunately, I did get a job working for a small production distribution company that existed at that time. It doesn't exist anymore, called Film Waste Pictures. And I worked there for almost 3 years. I started in 1980. And then in '83 I left when they were taken over by Orion, who had a production deal at Warner Brothers at the time, and had decided to get back into their own distribution business, and they bought Film Waste to basically do that. And I decided, probably stupidly, that at the age of 23, that I should quit and go off and start my own production company. That didn't work very well, and I ended up partnering up with my stepfather, who was an old-time movie producer from the 70s, who was sort of coming towards the end of what he was doing, and revivified what he was doing in a way by doing it together. And the first movie that we made together was a film called Oxford Blues, which was, I didn't realize at the time, was a early Brat Pack movie. And I became good friends with Rob Lowe and Sheedy, who were in it. And when I came back to California after that film was over, Rob introduced me to a lot of his friends, and I made films with Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez and Jimmy Spader, and we made 7 films together, Elliot and I, and then I quit basically and decided I wanted to try to do it myself. I made another 23 films, and then in very quick succession. And then in 1994, William Morris came out of the blue and asked me if I wanted to come to the agency and be an agent, which initially I said no, and then they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I went to go start the independent film department for them, which was a brand new idea. None of the agencies were involved really. They were involved in packaging independent films, but they weren't really involved. They didn't have a unit per se that was in charge of trying to make independent films at the agency. So I went in '94. I stayed there for 15 years. I made close to 300 films for the agency, worked on some of the greatest independent films ever made. And then when William Morris and Endeavor merged 8 years ago, I decided that I was 50 years old and I wanted to get back to making my own movies. And in the last 8 years, I've made another 55 films. So that's basically me. I've made over 350 films in one way or another at this point, 380 actually, to be exact. And I'm trying to make great movies now. When I was a kid, I made 30 films before I became an agent, and it was really, I was in a learning curve of how to actually produce movies, do budgets, handle crews, handle stories, handle editing, handle distribution. The agency taught me to really think about the way films are getting made, what kind of films to make, how to arrange the distribution for those films, how to sell the international rights for those movies, how to make deals with actors and directors. It really taught me an enormous amount. So once I left, I was armed with incredible knowledge and relationships, and I've been able to then take my knowledge and skill set now, and really focus myself on trying to make movies that have a social relevance, and in particular, which I'm sure we'll touch on, promoting female directors. In the last 5 years, I've really made the effort to go out and try to hire as many women as possible in the films that I'm working on. That doesn't mean I'm exclusively working with women, but where I can and where it makes sense, I'm going to do it. And that's led to this film that I have out currently called Mudbound, which was directed by an African-American woman called Dee Reese, and is getting some attention, which is great. And it's a serious movie about race, and it's the type of movie that I'm trying to do. Well, I know people always say, which ones are your favorite movies? You know, there's lots for different reasons. Oxford Blues, obviously, because it got me started. Men at Work, because I had the best fun ever working with Emilio and Charlie on that picture. A movie called Wide of the Eye with an English director called Donald Campbell. These were the films I made before I became an agent. Because Donald was the first director that I worked with who was a real artist, and I got to be that close to the sort of madness of it all, and understood the process of somebody who is a true artist, and how they, and I'm not saying that the other filmmakers and people I was working with aren't, but he was particularly interesting psychologically, and so I got to be close to that personality, and it taught me a lot, because when I went to go be an agent and got to work with these incredible movie directors too, at that point I had a language and a skill set that I was coming with, and also I understood how to make films and distribute them. So it gave me a tremendous leg up when it came to making films. So the agency, the films that I'm really fond of. As I said, I worked on some incredible movies, but The Apostle and Sling Blade were the first two movies that were really hits and were nominated for Oscars, that were important films and would not have happened except for me. I was the determining factor in making those movies happen, and getting distribution for them, and really starting a career for Billy Bob Thornton as a movie director, which he doesn't do so much anymore, but he's an incredible director. And then some of the early pictures with Gus Van Sant, Elephant, Paradise Park, later on Milk. Just getting to work with somebody like him was just incredible. Monsters Ball, the first African-American woman to win Best Actress Oscar. That film was an impossible film to make, and I somehow figured out how to do it. The Diary of a Mad Black Woman launched the career of Tyler Perry, who is, that was his first movie, and he's now has this unbelievable career. So for me, it was very meaningful, because I got to work on the beginning of something amazing. I don't know. I keep, now in my second part of my career, maybe the third act, maybe, Dallas Buyers Club, because it was a film that nobody in town wanted to make, and I was absolutely convinced that there was a massive audience for that film, and I was 100% right. The Butler, a movie that also a difficult picture to make. Sony had decided they weren't going to make it, and I managed to raise $25 million for an African-American subject matter that was a drama, really, more than an action picture, which was very difficult in this environment, where the international rights for a film like that on paper don't look good, but actually turned out to be the opposite. The movie did $80 million overseas, and proved that actually, if you make a great movie, doesn't matter what it is, people will come and see it. All Is Lost was a follow-on from one of my first movies after I left William Morris, Margin Call, which is a film I really loved, and All Is Lost was the follow-on for J.C. Chandor. That launched a great career for a very cool young director now, and got to work with Robert Redford, who I idolized when I was a kid, and the idea that I actually got a chance to work with him was incredible for me. And now, of course, later on here, Mudbound. And I'm forgetting Ain't That Body Saints, which is another picture I really feel kind of helped launch the career of a wonderful director called David Lowery, who's now got a very successful career, going for himself, working with both studios and independent films. That's my thing. I love working with young directors and helping them get their careers started. I actually enjoy working with older directors. I really enjoyed working with Werner Herzog on Queen of the Desert. So. It's a mixture. Well, look, I'm relentless about my movies now. When I find something that I want to make, I'm absolutely relentless about it, and I become tunnel vision on it. And I know other producers that my contemporaries and my peers, you know, they work on multiple films at the same time. I do too, but when I'm on a movie, and in my mind that's my next movie, I'm relentless about it, and I'm calling everyone, and I'm cajoling people, and I'm begging people, because I'm not a financier. I don't have the money to finance a movie personally. You know, I've always felt like, you know, that the money part of it will come to me if I make good movies. But the making money was never really the goal for me in making films. And that may sound stupid, but that's not my primary motivation. My primary motivation was to make great films and create a body of work that was important. As I said, I don't take no for an answer. You know, I think that in life, the world is full of no's. People turn around and say no to you all the time. It's just the nature of what we do, and particularly in the film business. It's much easier for somebody to keep their job or remain safe in whatever it is that they're in by just saying no to something, because then they've taken no risk. You know, the making a film is a very risky proposition. But on the other hand, in my mind, I'm trying to find the one yes, because that's all I need is one yes, because then it's going to happen. And strangely enough, when you go to make independent films now, you need actually 5 or 6 different partners, so you need 5 or 6 different yeses, you know? But the first one's the most important one, because if you have that, then other people will follow along. Well, that one is an interesting example, because my involvement with it was sort of had started 11 years before it actually got made. When I was an agent at William Morris, another director, Mark Forster, had that script, who I'd worked with on Monsters Ball, and he wanted to make that picture, and he had a couple of movie stars interested in doing that film, and they ended up, the other agents, not me, different agencies, ended up selling the film to Universal, where it just basically languished over a 10-year period, and they developed it and redeveloped it and redeveloped it, and it's, you know, when we finally got to make that film, there was something like 10 different versions of the script, and none of them were very good. And the one that we actually ended up shooting was the one that Mark had wanted to do right at the very beginning with the 2 original writers. So, you know, the pitfalls of the studio system making independent films is a whole other subject, which is much longer. But I'd known about that movie for quite some time, and I knew the producer, Robbie Brenner. Socially, I would run into her in town and say, hey, what's going on with the movie? And it always seemed like it was going to happen, but it wasn't. It never did. And I won't mention all the different directors and actors that were involved over the years, but it never happened. And then later on, when I was back to producing my own movies again, I was making a picture called The Paperboy with Matthew McConaughey and Nicole Kidman and David Oyelowo. And I didn't really know McConaughey very well, and I asked him, you know, just casually one day, trying to make conversation with him, have you found another movie that you want to do? And he said, yeah, I'm going to do Dallas Buyers Club. And I'm like, really? Wow. Because I knew that script for a long time. And I also knew the script had been floating around in town and people had been turning it down. So the fact that he wanted to do it really kind of made it a whole different thing. And then the producer, Robbie Brenner, and I talked, and she said, yes, I've got Jean-Marc Vallée, who I've been developing another picture with, and it didn't happen, and he's going to come on and direct this movie now, and we raised the money. And so there didn't seem like a place in it for me at that point, which was disappointing to me, because I really loved that project, and I thought Matthew in that part could be incredible. And then a year later, while I was making The Butler, I got a phone call from the agent at CA that was working on it, and she said to me, the whole movie fell apart, all the money blew up, it's not happening, we need the money like immediately, you got to talk to Robbie, she knows you always love this might be your opportunity to get involved. I called the producer, she said, you have 3 days to come up with the money, and I figured it out in 3 days, and it turned into the thing that I always dreamed it would be, which is Oscar-winning picture. It's an incredible piece of work, and the beauty of it, too, in a way, was it was a movie I'd known about, wanted to do. They had pages and pages of people in town that said no. So many people come up to me now and go, God, you know, I had that script at one point. And like, yeah, well, then why didn't you do it? You know, and But I got to make it with the company called Voltage, which was a young French kid that was running that, Nicolas Cage, who I literally met when he was 20 years old in Cannes. That's a whole other long story, but you know, it was a full circle of relationships, and that's another key aspect of what we do. It's about relationships and maintaining those relationships. I spent my life and career as a producer and as an agent doing favors for people, always hoping that later on those favors would end up being repaid. And that one was, I did a big favor for Nicolas when he was a kid, and it got repaid in a big way when he financed this movie, and it became a big hit. So that's another aspect of what we do is trying to make sure that you keep relationships with all the people that you're working with, because you're going to need them and they're going to need you at some point. I was passionate about it for a very simple reason. First of all, I didn't really know anything about the Jim Crow era when I read the script, because it's not part of the English history syllabus. So I didn't know anything about that part of American history. And as far as I can tell now, it was sort of an era that was sort of swept under the carpet, because I don't think it's an era that anyone's particularly proud of. And the script just, it spoke to me. I know that race is a big issue in this country. It hasn't gone away. It's as important a subject as it's ever been. And I felt like if I could make a film that discusses race and shows all the negative parts of it, but could end with the last word of love, that was an important message that I wanted to put out. And that was literally the last word in the script, the last word that's said in this movie. Then on top of it, of course, you know, I wanted to make it with an African-American director, because I felt that was important to have an African-American voice bring this kind of subject matter to the screen. And I also wanted to work with a woman because of the programs that I have. So I set myself up with a very difficult task, because it's not a cheap film to make. It's epic in scope. The movie cost close to $12 million, and that's a lot of money for an independent movie. And the cast of the film, I wanted it to be authentic. I wanted the director to feel like she had the opportunity to cast exactly who she wanted in this picture, so that she could tell her story with maximum effect without people going, oh, there's that huge movie star, or there's that huge movie star. It was important to get great actors. You know, if they happen to be famous, fantastic. And she chose the most brilliant cast for this picture. It wasn't an obvious film to make, but we were coming off a period 2 years ago where there was a lot of press about how the Oscars are so white. And I think that people were already thinking, okay, how can we change that equation? So along comes a movie that has a chance to be that. And I think because of that, some very brave individuals, Charles King, Chris Lamole from Omri, Teddy Schwartzman from Black Bear, they jumped in and they saw, you know, it's also potentially a hole in the marketplace, that if you could make a good movie, that you could actually go out and make money into this hole, so to speak. But on top of that, it was just important to get a movie like this made. It was extremely risky for everybody involved. And I think that it really had more to do, in a way, with the fact that I've made some great movies over the last few years, and I have a little bit of juice in terms of my taste level, and that they trusted me that I would bring a good movie to the market, and I, you know, brought a great movie forward with this picture. It's very timely. It's important, and as I said, the last word in it is love. And if you could make a movie about hate that really was about love, that's something to be reckoned with. Well, I've lived through a long period of making movies. You know, I've been doing this for 30 years, so the business is constantly shifting, and you just adapt to it. You know, you try to stay aware of what the current trends are. In fact, what I think you try to do is try to be ahead of the current trends, because in the end, that's going to benefit you the most. You know, when I sold Margin Call to Roadside and Lionsgate, at that time, the day and date streaming business was basically a graveyard for films that hadn't worked out, and people were just trying to find some way to get their movies out, and not closing your mind off and not staying with what other people say you should do, but constantly trying to figure out how to stretch the envelope and you know, and do things that are different. That's going to help you. Well, yes, you know, the path that you try to follow in terms of making films has sort of remained quite similar over the last 5 or 6 years, which is that you find your film, you budget it, you figure out where you can shoot it, where you can get a significant percentage of the budget back from a local tax incentive or tax credit or soft money. Then once you figure out what the real cost of the movie is going to be after you've gotten your incentive, then you go out and you try to figure out what the international rights of those films are going to be worth, and you try to sell off some of that. Then you try to get a gap loan against what hasn't been sold, and then you try to raise equity to fill up the difference. So that's the way that most people make movies these days, and that's the way that that I'm still trying to make films. Of course, if you're lucky enough, that method of financing films was really kind of pioneered, and we were a part of it too. At William Morris in the early days was pioneered as a way to not have to rely on the American distribution companies to get your films made, because there aren't that many of them. There's maybe 9 or 10 distribution companies that are significant, and there's way more movies being made than they could possibly say yes to. So the way to do it, and also to maintain some creative freedom in the process of making films, was to set them up in the way that I'm describing, and use equity as the sort of the gap financing against American rights, so that then you could make the film, and then if you were right that it was going to turn out to be a great movie, then you could go to a film festival and sell off the American rights for the film and find the distribution company that actually wanted the movie. I'd seen so many instances where American distribution companies got involved in films prior to them being made, and then they saw the film after it was done, they didn't like it, and they basically dumped it, and other distribution companies saying, God, I wish I'd had that movie. So that was also a reactionary way of financing movies, was to set it up in such a way that you could end up with a distribution company that really loved your movie when you'd actually made it already. It takes a lot of people to help get movies made. And then when you actually make the movie, it takes a huge crew of people to actually make it. So, people see movies and go, oh, the director made that movie. Well, the director kind of did, but there were a lot of people that were involved in the creative process with them, and collaborating with them and helping them make great movies. So, when you're going off to make a movie, think about who your cinematographer is. Think about who your production designer is. Think about who the editor is. Who's going to do the music? Who's actually written the script? And can you collaborate with them and make it better? There's a lot of people involved in making films. And then, of course, the producers. Well, the first rookie mistake is just thinking, okay, well, here's my movie. This is the budget of the film. I'm just going to go ahead and raise the money all privately, and I'm just going to make it and then see what happens at the other end, without really investigating what the value of that film could be later on, based off the genre and the director and the actors. So you see so many films that cost $5 million that should never have been made for more than 2 or 3, and everybody involved loses money, and then the people who invested in it don't want to do it anymore. So you basically burn possible investors for future films. And so the rookie mistakes are you didn't really think about the script. You just wanted to make a movie, and there's, for all the films that are in the film festivals that you see, all the great young filmmakers that are coming with new movies, there's 30, 40 that never made it, or more, maybe 100 that never got there, because the people involved didn't really think through what they were doing, and they didn't really get the scripts in place, or they didn't find actors that really meant something or were good enough actors to make it into a good movie. And I think when I go try to put together a movie, I'm thinking about every single factor of it. I'm thinking about who's going to buy this movie later on, who should be in this film, which actors would be perfect for it, which ones mean a little something so that we can actually go out and do some pre-sales. What would the film look like when you actually put those actors in it? You start visualizing a little bit with the director about what's going to happen at the end. Is the script good enough? Are there scenes in the film that are way too expensive that don't really mean anything anyway? So why are you doing it? Why are you wasting money in areas that you could be spending it in others, like hiring better actors or doing better costumes or better music at the end? So I'm trying to think of every factor in the making of a film when I go into it, and I think that sometimes people go into movies and they don't think about it, any of that. They just go, oh, I'm going to make a movie, and then they get burned at the other end. Well, first of all, there's a few different questions that you're asking me about the relationships with agents. But the first one is, young filmmakers are always asking me, how do I get an agent? Well, the best way to get an agent is to make a movie. And I know that sounds weird, but you got to make a little movie or a short and get that out there, have people see it, and have agents chase you. The best way to get an agent is where 3 or 4 agents are trying to get you, and then you can choose which one you want. Trying to go out and get an agent is very difficult on your own. You have to have something to show, and you have to have a script or a short film or a feature, something that you've done that lets them look at it and go, I could sell you. I know who I could take you to and get a deal with. Because for agents, it's about one thing. It's about making money and making money for your company. Now, hopefully a lot of the agents out there are very tasteful people, and they're making money from art, basically, which is another thing that's almost impossible, but that's what they're doing. And they're looking for artists. And so as a filmmaker, you've got to have some piece of art that you can show that they can say, yeah, I could sell that. Later on, as far as the agencies are concerned, they're a key factor in everything that we do. There's no way that you can make a film at this point of any meaning or any size or scope without having multiple agents help you through the process. So agents that represent the director, they will help you get to the agents that represent the actors, and they will give you ideas. They will help you get to the independent film divisions, because after I started this whole thing with William Morris, every other agency copied it, and they all have independent film divisions now. And those groups will help you also raise money. So they're a key factor in all of this. And then, of course, there's managers out there. That's a whole other thing. What are the managers? Who are they? Most of the managers are really just agents without having any restrictions on them, and they're producing as well as agenting. So they're the same thing. If you can find a manager that wants to represent you, they'll end up probably getting you an agent. And and lawyers are a good way to start, because they know all the managers and all the agents, or the independent lawyers, lawyers that are making independent films. So there's lots of different people out there that are looking for talent. That's the whole part of what they're all trying to do. They're all constantly looking for the new thing, because it's hard to sign people. So the easiest way is to start at the beginning of their careers and sign them and keep them for their whole career. That's the dream, you know? That doesn't necessarily always happen, because when you get to be a huge director or a huge actor or a huge writer, you suddenly decide, oh, I need a huge agent and I'm gonna leave. But that's a whole other part of it too. But you know, yes, you need to somehow or other find somebody who believes in what you've created, and try to create something first, a short script, movie, that they can see, hopefully see at a film festival, because the film festivals is like having a stamp of good housekeeping approval on your project. It's like somebody else said this is good, and it's not just you. So agents are a key factor in making movies, and the people who are also kind of agents, the lawyers and the managers. I can't even think of a film that I've made in the last few years, even really in my entire career, because, you know, when I was an agent, I was doing the job that I'm describing. You need to have agents and managers help you get your movies made. You just can't do it in a vacuum. You need people who are professionals to help you navigate the waters of the other agencies and the other agents, and the distribution companies, and you need to have lawyers, smart people who help you make the right deals. You know, it takes people always say it takes a village to make a movie. I think it takes a city. It takes the city of New York or Los Angeles or London to actually get films made. Well, you know, the dream is you have many distribution companies coming after you, and you can basically choose the ones that you want to be with. My advice is always, people ask me all the time, like, oh, you know, who's the right distribution company for my movie? The right one in my mind is the one that's the most excited about it. You can always figure out a good deal with those people. I mean, obviously, if somebody offers you $1 million and somebody offers you $100,000, and, you know, probably doesn't make sense not to take the $1 million. But on the other hand, where there's multiple people that are involved and the deals all seem kind of similar, it would be to go with the one that you actually believe is going to do something with your movie, and has proven already that they've done good things with other people's movies. So sometimes you don't have that option. Sometimes you only have 1 or 2 people that want your movie, and they're not your dream people. But you know, you've got to make some kind of deal, because that's how the movie's going to get out. Self-distribution is extremely difficult, particularly at this time in life. There's so many different ways to see movies now, you know, and that includes all the different streaming companies: Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Apple, they're all coming. That's the big change that's happening in our business right now, is that these huge internet behemoths are coming towards us. They all need original IP to keep the eyeballs on their websites, and so they're all interested. And of course, companies like Facebook could be the most incredible distribution companies because they have hundreds of millions of people on them every day. So why wouldn't they distribute films to them or be involved in the process? It's just a matter of time, I think, before they all come, which is a good thing for the business because it brings more money to it. It's a head scratcher because, of course, then all the people that produce movies and make movies and distribute films internationally are trying to figure out how to marry the digital distribution of films in America with the traditional theatrical releases overseas, which traditionally have been 4 to 5 years behind America in the way that films are being distributed. So it's always a catch-up for them, and it creates a dilemma quite often for producers. You make a movie, you've sold it off internationally, quite a few territories, you've raised independent money to make it, and then a company like Amazon or Netflix comes along and they want to buy the film, and it creates a problem for all the people that are distributing the films overseas because they're still going through the same traditional release patterns of theatrical, then pay television, then the DVDs at the same time, and then free television, and the different methods of which films are being distributed in different mediums. Whereas when it goes onto a streaming channel here in America, that's it. They're going to sell some DVDs of it, maybe, if it's Amazon, but primarily they're going to put it on Amazon Prime, and Netflix is going to make it available right on their site. So that creates a dilemma for the international distributors. And quite often what you see happening at the moment is the big internet companies like Netflix and Amazon buying back international territories from the people who already bought them. So that creates additional problems for the international sales companies. But it's all a process of trying to adapt to the new ways in which films are being sold, seen, primarily being seen. I think our movie habits are changing. I still like going to the movie theaters, but a lot of people are quite happy to watch it on their computers and television, and that's just fine. I think people just watching movies anyway is good for the business. If you make films and people are seeing them, that's a good thing. Doesn't matter how they see them.